I am deeply grateful for all your hard work over the last 2 weeks, and in particular, over the last 48 hours. Through the nights and the early hours of the morning, we worked collectively for consensus. The presidency listened, engaged, and guided. I promised I would roll up my sleeves, and I promised I would be with you every step of the way. And you, my colleagues and friends, you did step up. You showed flexibility, and you put common interest ahead of self-interest. We have the basis to make transformational change happen. Let us finish what we have started. Let us unite, act, and now deliver. I declare open the 6th meeting of the CMA. I'd like to continue consideration of the decisions and conclusions recommended for adoption by the CMA. I will also report back on the outcomes of the consultations undertaken by the Presidency of relevance to the CMA. And I will report on the outcome of the consultations undertaken by the Presidency on building opportunities for youth to engage in the UNFCCC process. The order in which the agenda items will be taken up is posted on the screen. I invite the CMA to consider agenda item 4, first global stocktake. At their plenary meetings on 6 December, the subsidiary bodies forwarded their work on this matter for further guidance. I requested Her Excellency Minister Barbara Creasy and His Excellency Mr. Dan Yongson to undertake further consultations on cross-cutting issues, while Joseph Tu and Alison Campbell finalized the 3rd iteration of the textual building blocks. Over the last couple of days, my team and I have undertaken extensive consultations with parties on the draft decision, and I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all delegations for their engagement and guidance in this process. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Outcome of the First Global Stocktake, contained in document FCCC/PA/CMA/2023/L.17. Hearing no objection, it is so decided. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, my dear friends, first, let me say, Assalamu alaikum, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you. We have traveled a long road together in a short amount of time. Over the last 2 weeks, we have worked very hard to secure a better future for our people and our planet. We should be proud of our historic achievement. And the United Arab Emirates, my country, is rightly proud of its role in helping you to move this forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the world needed to find a new way. And by following our North Star, we have found that new path. We have delivered a comprehensive response to the global Stocktake and all other mandates. Together, we have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction. We have given it a robust action plan to keep 1.5 within reach. It is a plan that is led by the science. It is a balanced plan that tackles emissions, bridges the gap on adaptation, reimagines global finance, and delivers on loss and damage. It is built on common ground. It is strengthened by full inclusivity, and it is reinforced by collaboration. It is an enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus. Many said this could not be done. But when I spoke to you at the very start of this COP, I promised a different sort of COP. A COP that brought everyone together. Private and public sectors, civil society, NGOs, faith leaders, youth, and indigenous peoples. Everyone came together from day one. Everyone united, everyone acted, and everyone delivered. We operationalized loss and damage and started to fill the fund. We mobilized more than 83 billion US dollars in new financial commitments. We launched Altera, the world's largest catalytic private investor that is 100% focused on solutions to climate change. And we delivered world first after world first. A global goal to triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency. Declarations on agriculture, declarations on food, declarations on health. Many more oil and gas companies stepping up for the first time. Stepping up to deliver against very ambitious goals and objectives. And for the first time, to deliver on methane and emissions. And we have language on fossil fuel in our final agreement for the first time ever. All of these are world firsts. And all of these are crucial actions that will help shape a better, cleaner world with greater and more equitable prosperity. And then we became the first COP to host a change makers majlis. And I felt that that was the turning point in our negotiations. You reconnected with your spirit of collaboration. You got out of your comfort zones and started speaking to each other from the heart. And that, the Change Makers Majlis, made all the difference. Now, we can truly say that we united and we acted and we truly delivered. My friends, here let me sound a word of caution. An agreement is only as good as its implementation. We are what we do, not what we say. We must take the steps necessary to turn this agreement into tangible actions. If we unite in action, we can have a profoundly positive effect on all our futures. And I mean all our futures. Because inclusivity has been the beating heart of this conference. It kept us going during the difficult days. You never gave up on this process. A process that was driven by solidarity, transparency, and willingness to listen. And everyone has been heard, from indigenous peoples to global youth to global south. And as a result, we have delivered a paradigm shift that has the potential to redefine our economies. We have reframed the conversation around climate finance. We have integrated the real economy into climate action. And we have moved to a new mindset where solutions to climate challenge become the drivers of a new economic age. Colleagues and friends, it has been a personal privilege for me to have the opportunity to guide this conference. I am humbled by the commitment I have seen and the unwavering efforts I have personally witnessed. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all who made this happen. To every country who came and made this COP a success, I say thank you. To every single participant, everyone I met in this very special place, I say thank you. You have come in record numbers. You care deeply about the future of this wonderful planet, and so do I. And to you, the delegates who met me on your rest day, and at 3 a.m., and 4 a.m., and 5 a.m., I also say thank you. And allow me to take this opportunity to express my deepest respect and gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The President of the United Arab Emirates. I am deeply grateful for his confidence, his guidance, and constant support. I hope we made you proud, sir. I really hope that we made him proud. And to my family, who I have seen far too little over the last year. You inspire me and you motivate me. I wouldn't be standing here without you. To my team, who have worked non-stop for more than a year. And who have supported me every step of the way in this historic and unprecedented achievement. I also thank you. Our country has shown that we can deliver on the global stage for the benefit of the planet and its people. We have helped restore faith and trust in multilateralism. And we have shown that humanity can come together to help humanity. Colleagues, our task was to build on the foundations that others have laid for us. And I tell you, what we have built together will stand the test of time. Future generations may not know your names, but they will owe every single one of you a debt of gratitude. We leave Dubai with our heads held high, and our work goes on. In unity, and solidarity, we will walk the new path that the UAE consensus has set for the world. Together, we will follow our North Star. We will follow it from here to Baku to Belém. And together, we will secure the future of this beautiful planet for the many generations to come. And let me finish by saying this. I hope that the spirit of partnership, inclusivity, and peace that has welcomed you here in the UAE goes with you from this place and lives for the good of all humanity. I thank you. I thank you for this historic achievement, and allow me to say one more time, if it wasn't for your collective effort, we would not have been able to achieve this historic achievement. I thank you again. Executive Secretary Simon, I invite you to take the floor.
Excellencies, delegates, colleagues, friends. I want to start by thanking the United Arab Emirates for hosting us and for all they have sought to achieve. We needed this COP to send crystal clear signals on several fronts. We needed a global green light signaling it's all systems go on renewables, climate justice, and resilience. On this front, COP28 delivered some genuine strides forward, tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency. A framework for the global goal on adaptation, operationalizing the Loss and Damage Fund, and making an initial down payment. At every stage, climate action must strive forward, side by side, with human development, dignity, and opportunity. There will be reams of analysis of all the initiatives announced here in Dubai. They are a climate action lifeline, not a finish line. Now, all governments and businesses need to turn these pledges into real economy outcomes without delay. COP28 also needed to signal a hard stop to humanity's core climate problem, fossil fuels and their planet-burning pollution. Whilst we didn't turn the page on the fossil fuel era in Dubai, this outcome is the beginning of the end. These climate conferences are, of course, a consensus-based process, meaning all parties must agree on every word, every comma, every full stop. This is not easy. It's not easy at all. Indeed, it underscores just how much these UN conferences have achieved in recent decades. Without them, we would be headed for close to 5 degrees of warming, an open and shut death sentence for our species. We're currently headed for just under 3 degrees. This still equates to mass human suffering, which is why COP28 needed to move the needle further. The global stocktake showed us clearly that progress is not fast enough, but undeniably it is gathering pace. I firmly believe this is because the political and economic logic is increasingly insurmountable. Human lives in huge numbers are being lost in every country, while fossil fuels hit household budgets and national budgets alike. Whilst there are vast benefits of bolder climate action, more security, stability, and protection for 8 billion people, more jobs, greater economic growth, less pollution, and better health, more empowerment of women as powerful agents of change, more harnessing of nature and its best custodians. Which brings me to what comes next. This is very clear. We must get on with the job of putting the Paris Agreement to full work. In early 2025, countries must deliver new nationally determined contributions. Every single commitment on finance, adaptation, and mitigation must bring us in line with a 1.5 degree world. Countries must prepare and submit their first ever biennial transparency reports by the end of next year. As UN climate change, we will keep working to improve the process and help parties go further, faster, and fairer. I want to pay tribute to all my colleagues at UN Climate Change for their unfailing professionalism, and commitment. Colleagues, I thank you for doing everything possible to keep us on the straight and narrow, and always with one eye on our planet, quite literally around the clock. Delegates, you deserve the support you need to have all information, facts, and facilities available in a good working order. So allow me to also flag that UN climate change is now creaking under the weight of mandated processes and work streams. Through the first global Stocktake, many parties called for various work programs, bodies, processes, and stakeholders to immediately step up their support in response to the GST outcome, helping enable more ambition and implementation of NDCs. Our budget is currently less than half funded, and so I ask you to address this. Otherwise, it will be impossible to fulfill parties' core requirements and expanded demands going forward. My final message is to ordinary people everywhere, raising their voices for change. Every one of you is making a real difference. In the crucial coming years, your voices and determination will be more important than ever. So I urge you never to relent. Delegates, friends, we are still in this race. We will be with you every single step of the way. I thank you. Shukran.
Thank you, Simon. I see parties have requested the floor. May I ask your indulgence to allow me to first adopt other key decisions, then I will give you the floor. I thank you for your understanding. I invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 5, Work Program on Just Transition Pathways referred to in the relevant paragraphs of Decision 1/CMA.4. At their plenary meetings on 6 December, the subsidiary bodies forwarded this matter for further guidance. I requested Marianne Carlson and Simon Cardy to undertake consultations on my behalf to conclude the work. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Work Program on Just Transition Pathways referred to in the relevant paragraphs of Decision 1/CMA.4 contained in document FCCA/PA/CMA/2023/L.14. Hearing no objections. Okay. I propose this work program is referred to as the UAE Just Transition Work Program. I invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 6, Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation, Ambition and Implementation Work Program referred in Decision 4/CMA.4. At their plenary meetings on 6 December, the subsidiary bodies forwarded this matter for further guidance. I requested Carlos Fuller and Kay Harrison to undertake consultations on my behalf to conclude the work. In addition, ministerial consultations on issues related to mitigation were conducted by Her Excellency Minister Grace Fu and His Excellency Minister Aspen Barthaid. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision entitled Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation, Ambition and Implementation Work Program referred in Decision 4/CMA.4 contained in document FCCA/PA/CMA/2023/L.16. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 8, matters relating to adaptation, sub-items 8A, Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh Work Programme on the Global Goal on Adaptation referred to in Decision 7/CMA.3. At their plenary meeting on 6 December, the subsidiary bodies forwarded this matter for further guidance. I requested the chairs of the subsidiary bodies to conduct consultations on my behalf on specific issues within the Global Goal on Adaptation. In addition, ministerial consultations on issues related to adaptation were conducted by Her Excellency Minister Meisa Rojas and Her Excellency Minister Jennifer McAllister. I invite the CMA to adopt draft decision entitled Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh Work Programme on the Global Goal on Adaptation referred to in Decision 7/CMA.3 contained in document FCCA/PA/CMA/2023/L.18. I invite the CMA to adopt draft decision entitled Presidency Youth Climate Champion as contained in FCCC/2023/L.13/FCCMA.2023/L.15. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I propose to call the decisions we have adopted: the Loss and Damage Funding Arrangement and Fund, the Global Stocktake, the Work Programme on Just Transition, the Mitigation Work Programme, Global Goal on Adaptation, Youth Climate Champion as the UAE Consensus. Allow me now to turn to the floor. I see a request from Samoa. Samoa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, let me thank you and your team, as well as the Secretariat, for all your hard work. We didn't want to interrupt the standing ovation when we came into the room, but we are a little confused about what happened. It seems that you just gavelled the decisions and the small island developing states were not in the room. We were working hard to coordinate the 39 small island states, developing states that are disproportionately affected by climate change. And so we were delayed in arriving here. So allow me, Mr. President, to deliver the statement that we were going to deliver before this text was adopted before us. AOSIS at the beginning of this COP had one objective: to ensure that 1.5 is safeguarded in a meaningful way. Our leaders and ministers have been clear. We cannot afford to return to our islands with the message that this process has failed us. This first GSD is of particular significance. It is the only GSD that matters for ensuring that we can still limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. The draft text you have presented to us contains many good elements. We see strong references to the science, complemented by a clear runway with milestones for strengthening party efforts to prepare and submit enhanced NDCs through to 2025. We also welcome the establishment of the Technology Implementation Program. These elements are important. The questions we have considered as the Alliance of Small Island States is whether they are enough. Zoning in on paragraph 26 and 29 of this decision, we have come to the conclusion that the course correction that is needed has not been secured. We have made an incremental advancement over business as usual, when what we really needed is an exponential step change in our actions and support. Mr. President, in paragraph 26, we do not see any commitment or even an invitation from parties to peak emissions by 2025. We reference the science throughout the text and even in this paragraph, but then we refrain from an agreement to take the relevant action in order to act in line with what the science says we have to do. It is not enough for us to reference the science and then make agreements that ignore what the science is telling us we need to do. This is not an approach that we should be asked to defend. Mr. President, on paragraph 28, we are exceptionally concerned that this does not do what we need. In subpara 28D, the exclusive focus on energy systems is disappointing. We are concerned that paragraphs 28E and H potentially take us backward rather than forward. In subpara E, we are being asked to endorse technologies that could result in actions that undermine our efforts. In subpara H, we see a litany of loopholes. It doesn't deliver on a subsidy phase-out, and it doesn't advance us beyond the status quo. Mr. President, on paragraph 11, we have requested repeatedly that this be moved to the preamble to be in line with the Paris Agreement. We do not want to renegotiate the Paris Agreement. This reasonable request has been ignored. We do not consider para 11 to have any effect on the obligations and benefits contained in the Paris Agreement and Convention on the Special Circumstances of the SIDS and LDCs. Mr. President, we must leave here with a set of decisions that meet the magnitude of the climate crisis, that meet the expectations that the world has of us, and that meet what is needed to secure the future of the coming generations. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Samoa. We understand your concern and we take note of your statement and will reflect it in this report. On the 7th review of the financial mechanism, Ambassador Tosi Mapano conducted consultations on my behalf on the way forward regarding the proposal from the United States on the 7th review of the financial mechanism. I will turn back to the floor. Pakistan, you have the floor. Pakistan.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellency, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by complimenting the COP presidency for closing successfully a historic COP. Bringing consensus to such critical, historic, and momentous decision-making speaks of the leadership skills, commitment, integrity of purpose, and perseverance of the COP president. Thank you, sir. Excellency, please allow me to share a personal anecdote. This summer, when I was talking to my son, I told him this is the hottest summer we are going through, and his reply was, "No, Dad, this is the coolest summer we are living. The next one is going to be worse." Our future generation is losing hope, but ladies and gentlemen, 14 days of continuous engagement with my colleagues gives me a new hope, the hope that we can still make this planet a better place for our generations to come. I take with me a sense of support, a sense of commitment, shared responsibility, respect for each country's needs, and unity in fighting the common challenge of climate change. The journey, ladies and gentlemen, from rhetoric to reality is difficult but not impossible, and we are witnessing it right now. I reassure this August forum of our fullest commitment and devotion in meeting the targets set in the Paris agreements and building towards a better tomorrow for all of us. Before I end, I would want to thank the COP presidency, the government of UAE, UNFCCC management, and most importantly, entire support staff, interpreters, staff on duty, security staff, who were there 24/7 to support us. They definitely need a big round of applause. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Pakistan. May I ask Brazil to take the floor? Brazil, you have the floor.
Agradeço imensamente
I'm very deeply grateful to the United Arab Emirates and more particularly to the president of this COP for his kind hospitality and strong and dedicated commitment to bringing us this far. I would also like to convey my thanks for the role played by civil society, which has represented all sectors and doing their utmost to keep the urgency alive in the decisions ahead of us.
em condições de aprovarmos uma
We are now in a position to sign off on a key agreement, which is to continue on the commitments that we assumed under the Paris Agreement. A commitment which we are undertaking here will
mas também nossas responsabilidades.
give us a pathway to achieve our ambitions, but also it will engage our responsibilities and our commitments in all their dimensions: mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation.
Alinhados a
So these are inescapable commitments. The commitment of 1.5C, we welcome the decision to establish a troika, the UAE, Azerbaijan, and Brazil,
Nestes 2 anos,
to ensure that in these coming 2 years,
o que a ciência nos diz, se a última janela de
we will be able
direcionar
to do what science is dictating, that is, we have a last window to achieve the 1.5C ambition. And as President Lula said in his inaugural statement to this COP, we cannot come away from here without a strong, firm decision to address the debate on the slow pace of decarbonization of this planet and the need to work towards an economy that is less dependent on fossil fuels.
a nossa próxima tarefa é alinhar
Our next task ahead of us is to align the means of implementation necessary,
a funda
and in so doing ensure that the fundamental premise of a just transition is maintained, and to ensure that developed countries do take the lead in this transition towards the end to fossil fuels and provide us with the necessary resources to ensure that developing countries can come up with their own mitigation and adaptation measures.
5.
The challenge of delivering this 1.5 mission will depend on everyone and fundamentally on everyone's commitment to ensure that their next NDCs are aligned with this objective. And Brazil is pleased and honored to be able to help in this endeavor. And who knows, perhaps we will be able together to celebrate this at COP30 in the Amazon in Belém. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. May I ask the United States to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. President. That's on. Mr. President, I want to first thank the entire UAE team and all the other parties in the Secretariat for the extraordinary work over the past 2 weeks to finalize this first global stocktake. I think as you look around this room and you look at the number of people who are here, it underscores the complications, the difficulties, the fundamental challenge of bringing 200 countries together and finding consensus. I think that everybody here should be pleased that in a world of Ukraine and the Middle East war and all the other challenges of a planet that is foundering, this is a moment where multilateralism has actually come together and people have taken individual interests and attempted to define the common good. That is hard. It's the hardest thing in diplomacy, it's the hardest thing in politics. And I think everybody here should feel good that while all of us can find a paragraph or sentences or sections where we would have said it differently, where we would have liked it not to appear, or we would have liked something else to appear. But in a multilateral venue, to have as strong a document as has been put together, I find, is cause for optimism, cause for gratitude, and cause for some significant congratulations to everybody here. I am in awe of the spirit of cooperation that has brought everybody together. And I think the applause that we just saw for the AOSIS states is a clarion call to all of us about our obligation and responsibility over these next months to make sure we're reaching as far as we can to implement as fast as we can. So I thank the UAE team and the Secretariat for pulling everybody together, for having the courage to put some things on the table for the first time ever. It is a document that reflects 2 years of work by all parties with over 700,000 pages of inputs from every constituency, from every part of the globe. And I'd particularly like to thank two individuals, Farhan Akhtar and Harold Winkler, who sort of quietly behind the scenes provided leadership in the technical assessment over the last 18 months. Now, while nobody here will see their views completely reflected in a consensus document of so many nations, the fact is that this document sends very strong messages to the world. First, the document highlights that we have to adhere to keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. That is the North Star. And we, therefore, must do those things necessary to keep the 1.5, everything we can to achieve this goal. And in particular, it states that our next NDCs will be aligned with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. I think everyone has to agree. This is much stronger and clearer as a call on 1.5 than we have ever heard before. And it clearly reflects what the science says. To keep 1.5 degrees within reach, we have to urgently peak greenhouse gas emissions and reduce them by a minimum of 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035. That is a goal that can keep us on track. The direction to triple renewable energy, double energy efficiency, phase down unabated coal power, halt and reverse deforestation and degradation by 2030, and substantially reduce non-CO2 emissions by 2030 are all foundational to our efforts for the next 7 years and beyond. And for the first time in the history of our regime, the decision, supported by all nations of the world, calls for transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems so as to achieve net zero by 2050. That is clear. And we would have liked clearly, many people here would have liked clearer language about the need to begin peaking and reducing fossil fuels in this critical decade. But we know this was a compromise between many parties. In particular, we would highlight that the use of any transitional fuels needed to be aligned with 1.5 degrees, which means if people adhere to that, that they will play a limited and temporary role in facilitating the effort to largely phase out fossil fuels in our energy systems by 2050, with abatement technologies focusing on hard-to-abate sectors. On adaptation, COP28 has successfully delivered a framework for the global goal on adaptation that will provide critical momentum to accelerate actions and increase resilience. It sets out in much greater detail how we will pursue and achieve the global goal on adaptation and how those efforts will be supported in coming years. On finance, this outcome makes abundantly clear that we must transform the international financial system to pursue and achieve our climate goals. The global Stocktake underscores that we must continue to drive investments in climate action at all levels, put policies in place to incentivize change, and shift finance away from the things that put our shared prosperity at risk. And it makes clear that we will stand by and support our partners in developing countries every step of the way as they take ambitious steps to build clean energy systems and resilient futures for everyone. Mr. President, both the Paris Agreement and the global Stocktake decision that we just adopted emphasize the importance of preparing and updating long-term strategies to reduce emissions and enhance resilience. 2 years ago, the United States and China committed in our Shanghai joint statement to update our long-term strategies by the Glasgow COP, which we both did. Most recently, we both issued the Sunnyland Statement, which we hope made a positive contribution to this COP. And today, I would join with Xi Jinping and Chinese delegation in announcing that the United States and China both intend, based on the many initiatives set out in the global Stocktake decisions, we will again update our long-term strategies, and we invite other parties to join us in doing so. This decision and other key decisions of the CMA, including the global goal on adaptation, establish critical work going forward to give effect to the global Stocktake's recommendations. We look forward to working with all of our partners here to achieve these ambitions. And again, I say how deeply impressive I believe this multilateral effort is. I thank everybody here. The spirit of cooperation is palpable and significant, and I think a major statement by all countries participating about what we would like to see in so many other sectors of global relationships in this day and age. I thank all for the efforts here and for what we have accomplished. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, US. May I invite Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency, for giving Bangladesh the floor. And let me first congratulate you and your team for the excellent work. If you recall, if I may share a personal conversation that I had with you when you visited Bangladesh towards the beginning of the year, I had said that this COP was going to be a litmus test for multilateralism. And I had also flagged the issue that the UN process, as it is currently structured, relies on consensus. And we also don't have an approved terms of reference for the entire COP process. It's been over 30 years, but still we have not been able to agree. So those were constraints. And I think what is perhaps one of the most impressive parts of this COP is, unlike in the past when we have all tried to hide behind the term consensus, we have tried to use that to protect our national positions. This is the first time that we have perhaps come out of our respective comfort zones and tried to look at the bigger picture. And we have all along said that consensus has to be on the basis of science. When the first draft was presented, we expressed, and we didn't mince words, that we were extremely disappointed because it didn't capture the ambition, and the North Star that you had talked about, I said, was now hiding behind dark clouds. I think over the last 2 days, thanks to the work and your initiative and that of your team, and our collective will, because at the end of the day, this is a member-driven process, and we have to really decide what we want to achieve. We have been able to remove those clouds. And what I see as significant is that this is the 28th COP. Between COP1 and COP27, we basically moved from one COP to the other. And here, I think we have not just transitioned, there is a potential of a game-changing outlook in terms of how we look at the COP processes, and we thank you, your leadership, and the team in that regard. The 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, and we have made it abundantly clear, this is not a political ask. This is not countries such as Bangladesh, LDCs, and climate vulnerable countries are asking for. It's not a political statement. It is the absolute upper limit that science tells us we can go to. And we feel that this then shapes the entire discourse in terms of mitigation, adaptation, funding, loss and damage, the entire chain. And let us not forget that the better we are at keeping temperature increase to within 1.5, the lesser will be the resources needed for adaptation. The lighter will be the burden on loss and damage. So this is critical. And as we unpack the text of the GST, I'm sure there will be issues which will require further clarification, which will require further discussion. And that the fundamental principle that we are going to have is the 1.5. So this is the spirit that we take out from here. When you convened the Majlis, Your Excellency, I think you used the words to the effect that we come in here with problems, with solutions, with fears, with apprehensions, and we want to go out of the Majlis with a solution. I think we are on the path to a solution through COP28, and again, we thank you for your initiative. Trust, solidarity is going to be absolutely imperative. Even if we had the perfect text, and we know that no text can be perfect, and this text is also not perfect, but it lays the foundation, given continued trust, given continued goodwill, given continued empathy, given continued solidarity, we can build on it. And I think that is what we take back. Of course, we would have liked more specificity, more concrete steps. Adaptation is really a life and death issue for a lot of parties who are represented around the table. We cannot compromise on adaptation. We cannot compromise on lives and livelihoods. So the finance delivery, rather than just reporting what has been done, should actually be geared towards action to delivering the resources that we need. And that is absolutely fundamental. So as we go back with certainly better spirits, we also have to keep in mind that the real test is delivery on this. And if I may say so, we came to UAE and we looked upon it as the Asia COP. We wanted to show that not just UAE, but Asia can also deliver. And I think all of us, and I thank all of the delegates that we have been able to do that. At least we have got off to a start. This is not the finish line. We have started on a line where everyone starts together. And I think this is the real achievement of this COP. UAE, as we know, and Dubai is a city of dreams. The impossible comes true. And this is a nation that was diving for pearls for thousands of years. And you are now reaching for the furthest stars in the galaxy. Let us also reach for that. And I believe that this COP is really going to set the tone for all future COPs. Let us have that trust. Let us have that empathy. Let us have that solidarity so that we can, in fact, when we look back at this COP, 5 or 10 years from now, we can say that this was indeed, in delivery, a game-changing COP. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I'd like to invite Bolivia to take the floor. Bolivia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President.
Habla en
Bolivia is speaking
nacional.
in its national capacity.
Hemos cumplido
It's been 8 years now since the adoption of the Paris Agreement.
el año 2015
2015
decidió abordar la lucha
was when the global community decided to address the climate crisis based on equity, based on differentiation between developed and developing countries.
Sin embargo,
However,
8 años
these 8 years saw developed countries working intensely to erode and indeed erase these principles and to transfer their binding obligations onto developing countries. By today adopting the decision on the first global stocktake, we regret and are very concerned to declare that the principles of the Convention and the Paris Agreement have deteriorated and been diminished somewhat more. We are seeing the worsening of a more unjust and inequitable world when it comes to fighting against climate change. There's more capitalism and more markets, but this is not a solution for the problems stemming from market capitalism. More inequity and injustice are no solution to the problems of inequity and injustice around the world.
no podemos
We cannot support outcomes that mean that the world will enter a new era of implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, but without equity and without common but differentiated responsibilities, without a differentiation between developed and developing countries, and without means of implementation and concrete financing for developing countries.
desarrollados
Developed countries
tomar
have not decided to take on the initiative of leading the fight against the climate crisis. They have not decided to change their lifestyles, and this is further jeopardizing the lives of people in our part of the world. We say a great deal about 1.5C and a great deal more about science, but developed countries that have plans to expand their fossil fuels going up to 2050 are running counter to science itself, the very science that they are talking about. In the real world, Mr. President, our true north, our North Star is even further beyond our reach. It's important that we maintain alive the 1.5 goal. This is important for humanity and to defend Mother Earth. But how can we do so without making a differentiation between the binding commitments and working with equity?
para ser equitativo.
If we are to be fair and equitable and to work towards an equitable and fair world, developed countries will have to do the opposite, to arrive at no fossil fuels in this plenary. They cannot postpone their commitments to 2050. The developed countries that are responsible for the great expansion across the world of the production of fossil fuels are now the champions of the North Star. They are the champions of maintaining 1.5 degrees within our reach. Developed countries say a great deal about financing, but there is no financing for climate, and say that there's no financing for climate change, but there's nothing tangible being done to finance the enormous machinery needed to fight this. There's a great deal said about human rights, but the developed countries are provoking and leading to the genocide against our brothers in Palestine. Developed countries say great deal about more ambition in tackling the climate crisis, but before the eyes of the media, but in the negotiating rooms of this conference, they are blocking and creating distortions, confusion, and adding complexity to all the issues that are priority issues for developing countries. The developed countries, instead of abiding by their commitments, have opted to not respect and abiding by their international commitments, but they continue to insist on more rules and goals for developing countries, and they expand colonialism, inequality, injustice, hunger, and poverty across the world. Imposing goals for everyone by 2050 runs counter to the Paris Agreement, and it strengthens the road and the pathways of colonialism, and it is eroding the institutional and financial capacities of the countries of the global South compared with the global North. Sir, we are once again victims of a neo-colonialism, which is carbon colonialism. We are still being treated as people who are failing to have their right to development asserted. We need a paradigm shift, sir. We need a shift from the current paradigm in the developed countries who are depending on colonialism, procrastination, climate injustice, and social injustice. And we have to change to a new paradigm based on solidarity, cooperation across countries, equity, and new means of implementation. Bolivia, sir, will support the consensus of the declaration of the Pact on the First Global Stocktake, but we would like to enter the following reservation. We would enter a reservation on the articles of the first GST that runs counter to the implementation of the Paris Agreement within the framework of the operationalization of the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. Thus, as we see it in Article 4.7 of the Convention and the provision of financing and means of implementation, as well as Articles 9, 10, and 11 of the Paris Agreement, and more specifically Article 4, subparagraph 5. 4.5, we enter reservation to Article 28 of the First Global Stocktake because it does not incorporate the principles of CBRD and equity set out in the Convention and Paris Agreement. There is no reference whatsoever to the differentiation between developed and developing countries, and to the fact that developed countries are the ones that must assume the leadership of the fight against the climate crisis. There is no explicit mention either of the provision of financing and means of implementation by the developed countries to advance the contributions of developing countries to fulfilling the global targets that have been established. Bolivia's interpretation is that all contributions of the plurinational state of Bolivia to fulfilling and making global efforts will be contingent on the provision of financing for the conditioned targets that have been established by the country in its NDC, and this within the framework of the implementation of the Live Well and in Harmony with Mother Earth framework. We close, sir, and we would ask that our declaration and statement be included in the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Bolivia. Thank you, Bolivia. Colleagues, dear parties, may I ask you to keep your statements short, please? May I ask that you maintain a cap of 3 minutes, please? 3 minutes maximum. And yes, of course, you can submit your statements in writing on the UNFCCC website. And yes, your statements will be reflected in the report. We have a lot of work before us, and I would like to conclude our work in a timely manner. Allow me now to ask the EU. EU, you have the floor.
Let me start by wholeheartedly thanking the presidency and Dr. Sultan, you in particular, for your leadership, your vision, but also your tremendous tenacity. And that of your team and the team of Simon Steele for all their work and all their contributions. And dear friends, let me also say that we have found it a tremendous privilege to work alongside all of you, from wherever you are, from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, North America, Asia, the Pacific, and the Middle East. To team up, to bridge the divide, and to unite. Because, dear friends, when we are all long gone, our children, and our children's children, and their children, will be there to deal with all the things we have left for them, the good and the bad. And with them in mind, and with that in mind, it makes this a day of gratitude, a day of solemn satisfaction, and maybe also of silent determination. And a day to salute the fact that humanity has finally done what is long, long, long overdue. 30 years. 30 years we've spent to arrive at the beginning of the end of fossil fuels, and to bridge our ambition on adaptation, finance, and mitigation, to get concrete and actionable on 1.5, as scientists have urged us to do for so long. And to all our friends from around the world who will continue to need our help, the islands in particular, I want you to know, and I will say to you, that we will stand with you in unity during this transition for as long as is necessary. Because prosperity within the planetary boundaries is there to be had for all of us. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. Colleagues, friends, dear President, we came here to assess and take stock. We knew that the Paris Agreement first cycle needed to deliver, but what we did was not enough. We wanted to draw lessons that could facilitate the way forward to ensure that we keep the 1.5 within reach. To enable a more effective response to the climate challenges, working together in building climate justice and easing the way for a much more secure future for all. Not everything is done, but we have taken a very important step forward. As the Commissioner has said, it has taken more than 30 years since Rio to focus on how to go beyond a fossil-fueled world, to start a new discussion on finance being all climate-proof, to raise the bar on adaptation on a cooperative basis, to respond to the very legitimate demands of the most vulnerable countries to count on mechanisms to address losses and damages caused by climate impacts. We align our goals and aspirations to those in the High Ambition Coalition, and very much in particular to the most vulnerable parties. We pay attention to what Samoa has said, to what Bangladesh has said. Climate justice still needs our engagement, our work. We enter into a new phase, but it would be very important to engage more, to do more. That this step forward and our commitment, our joint commitment, delivers much more in this very critical decade, to work in an united manner, to act, to deliver. We welcome and thank the strong work and leadership shown by the COP presidency and his team, the Secretariat, but also by all delegates. Climate science, activists, this is something where we can recognize a little bit or much coming from all of us. We welcome the committed dedication of all. We think that the most relevant thing here is that science and the 1.5 goal are at the center of the whole package. It needs to drive our action on climate, all to contribute, all committed. Friends, colleagues, it's time to do much more. We take a step forward, ensuring a sharp decline on emissions in line with the 1.5, peaking by 2025. 43 decline on emissions by 2030 and 60% by 2030 is demanded by the IPCC, is reflected in this test. This means building on climate justice. We need to provide a strong and clear message on the need to work on many different fields, but in particular, to accelerate action in energy transition and access to energy for all, to halt and reverse deforestation, to take into consideration biodiversity as the most relevant issues where people, where humankind can build and keep on building prosperity. Adaptation is at the forefront and takes on the relevance it needs. Still, much needs to be done, but we understand that we need to work much more to ensure common goods such as fresh water, health, biodiversity, or food security. Early warning systems are very important. Delivering on loss and damage, changing the way we address climate in the international financial institutions, doubling adaptation funding are only the first step forwards. Back home, we Europeans are committed. Current action, current legislation ensures we will be doing more than 57% reduction by 2030. And we are committed in our legislation to achieve net zero by 2050 at the latest. We think that we need to provide public assistance, but it is also our task to go beyond that, to keep on doing things to ensure that climate-proof is the new reality when talking about prosperity. We are committed not to leave anyone behind. There are many things that we miss in this text, but we sincerely think that this is a very relevant and positive step forward, and we are very happy to take this step forward with you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, EU. May I ask Cuba to take the floor? Cuba, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon,
Señor presidente,
Mr. President.
reconocemos la importancia
We recognize the importance and the results achieved in this conference, where the role of the presidents of the UAE has been decisive, along with your team in seeking to bridge positions in a text that is reflects one of the most difficult and complex COPs since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. The difficulties that we are facing today have many causes, including, I would highlight, and we have heard it mentioned many times here, the increase in emissions and the closing window to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees. This crucial goal has been characterized here as our North Star. But what is true is that above and beyond this bid, in the firmament, there is a whole constellation of purposes and goals that we must achieve in a balanced way, and this would include the goals geared towards eradicating poverty and ensuring that we achieve sustainable development and do so with equity. Our commitment with the climate regime is firm, as you can see from our nationally determined contribution. In Cuba, we stand ready to do even more, and it is our political goal to make our energy matrix entirely renewable. But this is not enough. It is not enough to have the will. We need huge resources in addition to our domestic resources, which is competing with the need for adaptation and competing with loss and damage and the SDG goals and its requirements. This is the dilemma facing developing countries. Therefore, the decisions that we take here must be fully consistent with our realities. We have so often emphasized that the main stumbling block to 1.5 is the lack of emissions reduction, and they reiterate failure to comply until today with their commitment to help developing countries. And among this list of responsibilities, we also have to include the absolute, unjust, and unbalanced international financial architecture, where we only see the developing countries plunged in climate crisis, and we are bearing the brunt of external debt and an international trading system that is more and more exclusive, as a result of which our countries are now facing the consequences of the growing imposition of unilateral measures under environmental pretexts, and which are eminently political in nature, and Cuba is one of such countries bearing the brunt of this. Sir, everyone here that have sought to bring pressure to bear here to undergo goals, to undertake targets and goals that have nothing to do with our national circumstances, we are invited to reflect deeply on this. Think about history and how we got to this point in the plundering and exploitation that was imposed on our peoples, and which was used as the basis for a development that is now we now have to pay for in climate change. There are debts and obligations. Perhaps this will help them to approach the next COP with a message of responsibility, humility, and the necessary empathy to ensure that we achieve better outcomes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Cuba. I'd like to invite Australia. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by recognising your personal leadership, tenacity, patience and courage. I know you've made many friends over the last year, and I know we'll remain friends for many years to come because of your personal leadership. You promised a strong result, and today we are delivering a strong result. Mr. President, I speak on behalf of the umbrella group of countries. The discussion at Dubai over the last 2 weeks has led to important milestones in our work to combat the climate crisis. We came together in solidarity at the beginning of this conference to agree to groundbreaking work on loss and damage. The new fund shows what we can do when we come together with an intent to deliver real outcomes. We've agreed to an ambitious new framework on the global goal on adaptation, which is very important. It elevates the role of adaptation within globally applicable targets that lay out a direction of travel and galvanise action and support. But undeniably, Mr. President, the central part of our discussions at COP28 has been the future of fossil fuels in our energy systems. Earlier this week, we called for more than a step forward, and today the world has stepped up. The outcome does not go as far as many of us asked for, starting with some of the most vulnerable countries, but the message it sends is clear, that all nations of the world have acknowledged the reality that our future is in clean energy and the age of fossil fuels will end. The global stocktake also shows that the nations of the world have come a long way under the Paris Agreement. 87% of the global economy is now covered by a climate neutrality target, and almost all countries have commitments to cut emissions. But the stocktake also shows us we have a long way to go, that we need a step change to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. The stocktake affirms the latest science that we will need to cut global emissions by 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035. We stand behind its call for future NDCs to be aligned with 1.5 degrees. This is the guiding North Star as countries prepare more ambitious NDCs. We stand behind its calls for NDCs to have economy-wide emissions reduction targets covering all sectors, gases and categories. We stand behind its call for a tripling of renewable energy, doubling of energy efficiency and substantially reducing non-CO2 emissions. We must take every opportunity. Global dialogues under the Mitigation Work Programme has provided rich examples of such opportunities in the energy and in the transport sector. It's disappointing that the decision this year does not reflect on these discussions and that a few countries have withheld progress on this important issue and the chance to elevate investment and opportunities for all countries. This delay cannot continue. We welcome the strengthened Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue on aligning finance flows with low emissions and climate-resilient development. This is an important area of work to reach the scale of global investment needed to reach 1.5 degrees. The new collective qualified finance goal due to be agreed next year is a pivotal moment to deliver urgent and necessary support for developing countries. We're pleased to see this acknowledgement and that the new goal must draw on the widest range of sources, including both public and private finance flows, domestic and international, both provided and mobilised. It needs to deliver a system transformation because the world has changed a lot in the last 30 years. Countries' capacities and circumstances have evolved dramatically since 1992, and so must their responsibilities. It's time, Mr. President, to have that discussion, because we need to pull every lever to achieve the scale of climate finance the world needs to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. We note the outcomes of the Just Transition Work Programme. We must support our workers and communities who've powered our countries for generations to an empowered future with good jobs. The language on human rights is deeply concerning. Human rights are not something that parties can be encouraged to take into account. Human rights must be respected, promoted and fulfilled. We welcome the decision on the Youth Climate Champion and note it complements the diversity of youth voices in the process and the important role that Youngo plays. Parties, the next 2 years will be a true test of the Paris Agreement. We will have bent the curve or we will have lost 1.5. We must join together in the highest possible ambition. This week shows what's possible when the world comes together. We need to take this energy home and turn it into action. Mr. President, just a few brief comments on Australia's behalf. I want to personally recognise the role of the Pacific countries in this process. The Pacific has long called for the highest possible ambition to keep 1.5 alive. And while this outcome today might not have fully met their calls, their voices are being heard. The message from this COP on the urgency of the energy transition is loud and clear. We must now deliver. Mr. President, again, let me conclude by thanking you for your leadership. There's been ups and downs in this process, but this is undeniably an historic COP, and we thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Australia. I'd like to invite Switzerland. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group, comprising Georgia, Liechtenstein, Mexico, Monaco, the Republic of Korea, and Switzerland. Let me first thank you and your team and the Secretariat for the hard work you delivered, not only over the last 2 weeks, but also about the last months. Mr. Chair, this is a crucial moment. For the first time, humanity is coming together in its diversity to agree on a managed transition away from the one resource which has enabled so much development. And for the first time, we decide that we want this transition to be just, to benefit all, and to respond to the urgency according to science. We stand by a clear message. The future is not fossil fuels, because there is no world where we can keep 1.5 alive if we continue investing in fossil fuels. And there is no equity in a world above 1.5. The energy package is a start, but it's not enough. The signal we give to decision makers and investors are absolutely critical. We need the energy package to be more precise and quantified and to deliver a sense of urgency. We need to define this further as we move to Belém in 2025. We need a commitment to follow up on its objectives on a yearly basis, and we're determined to bring accountability to the energy transition. What happens next year to respond to the outcomes of COP28 will be critical. The moment of truth that will define whether COP28 is the crucial milestone will be when countries submit their new climate targets. The elements are there for a good response, but everyone needs to be fully engaged. We welcome the encouragement for all countries to move towards economy-wide NDCs and to peak global emissions by 2025. We look forward to the capacity-building workshops, and we look forward to working with the presidencies to build political momentum around the highest possible ambition in submitting new NDCs, including with those who have the most contribute to the Paris Agreement. We are pleased to see the adoption of new targets for adaptation, which allow us to prioritize adaptation actions across water, health, ecosystem, and especially vulnerable ecosystems like oceans, mountains, and the cryosphere. They clearly lay out the actions that governments are expected to take. It is clear that we need to accelerate our work to make all financial flows consistent with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. We would have liked to see a much stronger signal in this regard, but appreciate that we can at least strengthen our dialogue on 21C and look forward to working with parties to unlock and shift global capital towards our common objectives. We further welcome the new dialogue on implementation, which will give us the opportunity to ensure that our collective actions, support, and broader financial flows will allow us to meet objectives set out in this global stocktake and take us to a low-emission and climate-resilient future. We regret losing references to conflict sensitivity, gender responsiveness, and respect for human rights on loss and damage. Those are crucial elements to make our support effective and to address them to the ones most in need. Excellencies, colleagues, let us keep continuing working together, striving for the highest ambition, listen to science, and build on this momentum to keep our guiding star in reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. May I ask Venezuela to take the floor? Venezuela, you have the floor.
Saludos, señor presidente.
Warm greetings to you, Mr. President. Venezuela, at the outset, wishes to thank the Presidency of the United Arab Emirates and the presidents of the subsidiary bodies, the Executive Secretariat, and all representatives of countries in attendance. We are thanking them for their efforts in getting us to this step that we are commemorating today. In the last few weeks, to Efforts to achieve the consensus in the last few weeks was no mean undertaking, but with political will, we opened up pathways to continue working for the implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. Humanity is now facing one of the worst crises in its history in all fronts: finance, energy, food, institutions, and culture. And this affects the life of the entire planet. Our region is one of the most vulnerable on the planet. And as a result of the effects of this climate crisis, we have suffered the gradual and increasingly extreme effects, and which is stagnating our efforts to achieve sustainable development and to tackle poverty, not only in my country, but indeed for all our peoples. Article 28 for Venezuela leaves the way open for interpretation, and we want the records to show, sir, the following. Nothing specified in paragraph 28 diminishes the obligations that are established in the Convention and Paris Agreement. They cannot be reinterpreted, and there's a special specification that developed countries should be the ones leading the mitigation efforts, and we would have liked to see this included in the text. Paragraph 28 cannot be used once again as a basis to impose conditions and conditionalities on policies, on the policies of developing countries, especially with respect to access to financing, technology transfer, or assistance in capacity building, nor should it be used as a basis to impose unilateral coercive measures which our countries have been affected by, or trade measures based on environmental pretexts that have adverse effects on developing countries. We have worked arduously to defend the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, equity, promotion and defense of the rights of Mother Earth, climate justice, and the need for more financing for adaptation and climate action, as well as the right to development of peoples in the context of the climate crisis which has been generated by capitalism. This has been the pathway ahead for countries, and as peoples of the world, we must follow this. Sir, we cannot close our statement without first thanking the government of the United Arab Emirates for its hard work to seek agreements for the benefit of humankind and in a complex negotiating process. And our founding father, Bolivia, said a great deal has been done, but much remains to be done. And this is an invitation for us to continue to build together a pathway to save the only planet that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, may I ask all parties to please limit their statements to a maximum of 3 minutes. A maximum of 3 minutes. I'll turn to Zambia. Zambia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Africa is very, very excited at the state of the decisions made so far. Mr. President, coming to Dubai a few days ago, we found an atmosphere of love, one where people wanted to discuss honestly, with respect. Consultation were deep. Indeed, everybody wanted to succeed. Mr. President, your office welcomed everybody from Africa, from Asia, from the Americans. Indeed, talking to everybody around the rooms, there was climate love. I knew that we were at the verge of making history here in Dubai. Coming to Dubai, Mr. President, one of the key asks from Africa was indeed the global goal on adaptation, as it was the most important ask for Africa. We are confident, Mr. President, that going by the deep spirit of unity and love exhibited throughout this conference, that further work on the GGA will grant us thematic, dimensional, and measurable targets that we aim for. Indeed, Mr. President, we've delivered on the GST, we've delivered on global finance, and we've committed to reformation of the MDBs. Even before any debate, Mr. President, we delivered on loss and damage. The fund was established and actual funds were committed. Mr. President, our other key ask was accessibility to science and technology. Right here in Dubai, there's commitment to triple renewables and to double energy efficiency. Mr. President, the 1.0 degree target is being maintained. The youth movement has been established. Support for NDCs and NAPs has been promised. So far, we believe and we can declare that COP28 has been successful. Mr. President, we know a lot more work has to be done, but we believe that the commitments made so far, shown so far by all parties, we will build ground, and we believe that with your leadership, more will be achieved. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Zambia. I'd like to invite Germany, please. Germany, you have the floor.
Oh my God.
Thank you very much, dear Chair. I would like to start with thanking also dear COP President for this great ending of this conference and underlining what the European Commission and the European Union just has said as a German foreign minister. However, starting with half a sentence you just mentioned. You started by saying, I would like to thank my family. And I think this was actually in the end the most important here. That in the critical moments, all of us, no matter if we come from Germany, from Samoa, from the Marshall Islands, from Colombia, from Taiwan, we thought at one moment of our family. What would they ask us when we come home? And I think this was a moment when we joined forces, when we united in diversity, as Brazil has said it yesterday night. And by this, we were capable of delivering on the motto you gave us before we came here, that we cannot just continue what we did in the past, but that this is now the moment for moving forward. And we have decided here today by this COP all together that we can save the future for our children only together. And by all the tears of joy we just had in our eyes, we saw also that there were some tears from some of us in the rooms who might be not only tears of joy. And we heard it from Samoa, and I'm looking back to the Marshall Islands. We feel you, we see you, and we feel and see that for your children, this might not be enough. And therefore, this text is for us as the European Union, as Germany, just the starting point. We have decided now on a transition to phase out fossil fuels. We have decided now that this way can be walked only together. If we are supporting the most vulnerables here in the world, if we are providing the technologies that everybody is capable of bringing together the fight against the climate crisis and justice. So this COP is not only about deciding that we are going to gather renewable, this COP is also about deciding that we are walking the path of climate justice together. And we would like to thank everybody who made this possible because we united in diversity, especially in those times where some people, and especially children, might question if multilateralism still works. We have showed that we can work together if we unite. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Germany. May I ask the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
In the name of God. His Excellency Dr. Al-Jaber, President of COP, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I speak on behalf of 22 countries, members of the League of Arab States. At the outset, the Arab Group expresses its gratitude to the great efforts that the presidency and its team deployed from the UAE. On behalf of the Arab Group, I express our gratitude to the efforts of all state parties in order to have a successful first global stocktake. Its outcome shows the various tracks that will allow us to maintain the objective of 1.5 in accordance with the characteristics of every nation. And in the context of sustainable development, we reiterate the importance of abiding by the provisions of the UNFCCC, especially common but differentiated responsibilities. This principle must be upheld as in the Paris Agreement. The Convention and the Paris Agreement support different approaches to deal with emissions in accordance with national priorities and conditions. The carbon cycle can be inclusive to